What's up guys, it's DevBird here, and today's episode we are going to actually be finally using items. And so far we just have this pretty little inventory that doesn't really do much other than hold data. But what's the point of having data if you can't use the data, right? So we are going to be creating a consumable type where we can use it and it's going to do something. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is the UI. So, what happens when we select an item? Well, we don't want the item logic to trigger immediately. We usually want some sort of confirmation window to pop up. So we want a little confirmation window next to the item to pop up, and then it's just going to say use or cancel. So let's set that up. First, we are going to make a panel. So we go to UI, go to panel, and this will hold the options. So it's a little small, so let's get it to the right size. But first, you see that the panel gets hidden underneath the other buttons, whereas we want it to actually appear above the other buttons. And in order to do that, usually you just move this around, but we need the panel to be under the button. So because we can't just like move this out here, and it's gonna mess things up too. So because we can't move it anywhere and it has to stay here, what we're gonna do is first we're gonna rename it and call this confirmation window, and then we're going to add a canvas to it, and then we are going to check override sorting, and then we're going to set this to 1, and it is going to pop up above all the other buttons here. So now that we have it popped up, let's make it appear next to the window, and let's just make it look a little bit nicer real quick. Alright, so we're gonna have it into the bottom right area of this button here, and we are now going to be creating some buttons, and we're going to make one at the top and one below it. So let's make this fit, and let's make it look a little bit nicer. And we'll just be calling this one use, and let's make the text a little more legible. And then we'll call this one cancel. And we're just going to change the button names to use and cancel. And that'll be it for that. And so now we need to select our button BG and hit apply, and it's going to pop up all of them, but you don't want that, so I'm just going to hide it and hit apply, and they're all hidden now. But they do exist. So what happens when you hit when you use the button? Well, this thing's going to pop up, and then you're going to be able to select use or cancel. Now there's something happening here where when this thing pops up, what's going to happen is you'll be able to select out of this. So you'll be able to select use, and if it up, you'll probably be able to go back to the first item. And we don't want that. So this is where visualize comes in handy. So it's trying to go to all the other stuff here, but we don't want that. We only want to be able to go from use to cancel, and from cancel to use. So we gotta go from automatic to explicit, and then go automatic to explicit, and then so when we select down, select on down right here, we're going to go to cancel. And depending on how you want your game, if you press up, do you want to go to cancel, or if it's only down. Some games you can do that, some games you can't, so it depends on your personal taste. But for my example, I'm just going to make it so that you have to press down to go to cancel and to press up to go to use. And then we also need to apply that. But we need to hide it first and then apply that. And so all of them will now have that logic. And so you can double check if we go to explicit here, and we can see that it indeed does have the logic behind it. One last thing for our confirmation window actually is we need to have the selector. So we are going to do it the exact same way that we did the selector for our button. So how we have a selector here, we're going to duplicate that and put it under our confirmation window. And right now it's transparent, so we can't see it. Let's get rid of this part. So let's select, or let's change from transparent to our selector so that we can see it. And you see how it's not in the proper place here. So we need a selector for both our use and cancel. So let's drag it in there. And we're going to need the selector to be nice and snug around this use button. So I'm just going to change the height and the width so that it encapsulates the use button. Normally you would just make a custom selector for your use button, but since I'm lazy, we're just going to alter the item selector. See, that's kind of weird and stretched out, but you know what, that's fine. So that'll do for that, and we are going to duplicate that and add it to our cancel and move it down. And that looks fine. And we're going to get rid of the little one that appears when you duplicate stuff. So now we need to set it up, and we can make both of them. So I just control click both of them and turn them to transparent so you can't see them anymore. And then we need to make the use and cancel go from color tint to sprite swap. And we're going to change the target graphic to the selector, and then make the highlighted sprite the selector, or the selector sprite, which is it's be kind of confusing, but what I mean by that is when you go to sprite swap, you have your game object is set as the target graphic, and then the highlighted sprite is the sprite you want to use that changes the game object sprite. So normally that's going to be in your assets, and it's going to be a sprite. Alright, so now that we have that set up, we can just hit apply. Let's hide our confirmation window since we do it anyways. Apply, and then if we look, all of our other stuff is now using the selector. So now that finally wraps up all the things we need to do for our UI. Alright, the next part we need to do is showing the confirmation window when we open it up. So it's a quick little thing we can do. So our button BG has a on-click event, and we already set it so that when you hit Z, it triggers the on-click event. So we can hit add to list. We are going to drag our confirmation window, and we're just going to make the game object set active bool to true whenever we select the item. So I'm going to hit Z, and it's going to select, and you see that it's not actually doing anything right now. We're not selecting the use or the cancel So that's why it doesn't get selected. So what we need to do is we need to manually create a method that also selects the use button when we open up the confirmation window. And to do that, we're going to go into our inventory slot, just because this is a nice little place this is a script that's going to be on all of our buttons, so we can reliably use inventory slot. And it doesn't have that much code on it, so we're just using it as like a little space to put logic on. So what we're going to do is we need a reference to the button, and then we just need to simply select the button. So let's first make a reference to the button. Let's call this public button, and we'll call this confirm button. And then we're going to make a public method, and it has to be public or else we won't be able to access it through the onClick event. And then we'll say select confirm button. And then we'll simply just say confirm button dot select. So we have this set up now, and we can use it. So let's go over to our button BG, and we're going to hit the plus button, and then we're going to drag in the button, and then we're going to go over to our inventory slot, and we're going to find the method we just made, select confirm button, and it's just going to call this piece of code here. So we're going to apply that. And so the last thing we need to do is set the confirm button, and so we're going to automatically have the confirm button set to the use button. So the use is going to get selected, and we hit apply to that. Depending on what you want, you can have the cancel selected first, or you can have the use selected first. So we're going to hit Z, and now you can see our use and cancel are now usable. And if I hit left and right, I actually don't get out of the use and cancel. If I didn't have the explicit navigation, what would happen is, well, pretty much this, I'd be able to select the items. And the reason I'm able to do this is because I'm using my mouse, but normally you wouldn't be able to use your mouse, but I haven't put that in yet. So make sure you have this, or else you'll be able to select your items outside of the use and cancel. Alright, so the next part is we're going to do some coding, and hopefully you've been following along with my dialogue series, because we're going to be using the Unity events the same way we did dialogue options. We're pretty much going to do the same method with items, or using items. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go over to our inventory, go to item types. We're going to create a new item type, because it doesn't make much sense if you can like use armor, weapon, like a potion or something like that. So we're going to create a new C# script and call this consumables. So these items we will be able to use and have custom logic behind them. So we're getting rid of all of this, and we're going to be deriving from item, our base item class, so we automatically have access to like things like the name, description, stuff like that. The next part we need to do is create the asset menu, and so let's just go over to our weapon. And we're just going to copy paste this, go over to back to our consumables, paste, and obviously we don't want this to be weapon, we want this to be consumable. This is just going to be the file name, see here. menu name is going to be from items, then instead of weapons, we're going to say consumables. And with just that, we can now create consumables. So let's go over to our items. Let's just make this a little more neat. So we're going to make a folder called consumables, and then we're going to create a consumable. And just like that, you have a consumable with name, description, icon, and max stack size. We're going to get rid of this because we need to do some coding first. So what we need from our consumable is a Unity event. So make a public Unity event, and it's not gonna have it pop up because we need to implement it in our using. So let's hit Alt Enter and then say using Unity engine.events, hit enter, and now it'll work. And let's call this Unity event, sure. And then, well, I should just call this item event and make it a little more specific. So now we're going to create another consumable. Let's just call this potion, and hopefully have like a sprite for this. Probably not. Let's make it a heart. Potion of health. Description gives health. And we'll make the stack size 3. And then now you see here in the item event, we can now add events to the item. And depending on what you want, you can have as many events as you need, depending on what the item is. So hopefully you've seen my other videos, and in my dialogue we create a event behavior, and I'm just going to show you what that is. I'm going to drag this out of here into my scripts, just so it's more, just so that you understand that it's not just specific to dialogue scripts. So we have this event behavior. Let's just go look at it. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to get rid of all this. These are just test events. I will keep this one. So all this looks pretty simple. So what you want to do is create a script called event behavior, and then make it a scriptable object, and then just add this create asset menu. It's as simple as that. And then you don't have to include this part, this test event. So just ignore that. All it is this. So what that does is you can create a event. So let's go over to our, let's go and create a event. Let's call this events. And what that allows us to do is when we go over to our consumables, we can find our events here, and we can call custom functions on the event script. So you see my test event here? I can now call it here. And the reason why I want to do this is because I can't actually reference in-game objects. So if I try to drag an audio, that doesn't work. Try dragging anything, doesn't work. I can only reference things in my project, not in my hierarchy. So because of that, I need to create a scriptable object called events and reference any methods here and call it in the event here. So now we have the event set up, and now we need to somehow get this item event all the way over to my use button. But first, let's just add the logic for the cancel, because that is a lot easier to do. So when we cancel, let's just add a onClick event, and we're going to set the game object of the confirmation window to false. And then what's the next thing we need to do? We need to select the button that the cancel button is under. So the way we can do that is we can go over to our inventory slot. Where is it? Inventory slot. Just gonna select this, go over to my inventory slot here, and then we're going to create a public void cancel button. And because the inventory slot is on the button that we want to set active, or select, not set active, but because the inventory slot is on the button that we want to select, we don't have to create a reference to it through our inspector panel. We can just create the reference here. So how do we do that? We say, let's just do something like this. We say get component, and then we get the button component, and then we select. And it is simple as that. So let's go over to our cancel. And so you see how we now remove the confirmation window, or we set it active to false. We need to drag our button BG and go find our method we just created, cancel button, and we need to apply and see how that works. I'm gonna hit Z, go over to cancel, and then it's going to select my button again. Z, cancel, selects my button again, and now we have a functional cancel button. So whenever we add an item, we need to set that item's event to the use button. And so we need to go and figure out where we add items. And so if we look here, you might be thinking in our inventory manager, right? When we add items here. Well, this actually only adds the item in our back end. We need to do this over here in our front end. So where do we add items in our front end? In our inventory UI. So if we go over here, this is where we add items, but most importantly, this is where we add items in stacks. So it doesn't really make sense to add another item event if the stack size isn't at its maximum capacity. So imagine if it was at 1 and you added to 2, you wouldn't need to add a new item event to that object. So we only need to do it when we add a new stack. And so here, inventory update, inventory add, where do we add a new stack? It's actually right here. And so let's do some commenting so that we know that's what happens. And it says add new stack, and then just say this one, update stack amount. And all this does is recalibrates the stack size if it's full. So usually this would go to 0, but we don't want 0, we want it to equal the max stack size. You see my previous video, you understand. I'm going to say recalibrate. Alright, so now we understand what's going on, and so we know that we need to add the logic when we add a new stack. And so what we need to do is we need to know if the item is a consumable. because if it's an armor or if it's a weapon, we have to do different things with that. We're not going to use it like a potion. So we need to say if new item is consumable, and then we make a new variable, call this consumable. Consumable, we'll call this, I'll just call this consumable, is equal to new item as consumable. And so what this does is that it pretty much checks if our new item is a consumable. So if this is a weapon or armor, this doesn't get called. It checks the type that it is and says that, oh, you're a of class consumable. Then what it does, or what it does here, is we create a new variable called consumable, and we make it equal to our new item, and we convert our new item to a consumable. And this works because we check if it is consumable. So this can never be like an armor, then goes here, then like you cast it as a consumable, but it's not a consumable or something like that. Alright, so how do we get the consumable logic onto our use button logic? So we can't just set it here on the onClick event. You might be wondering why, and it's because something is wrong. Our Unity events and onClick events are not the same thing, or button click events, specifically that. So we can't just convert the Unity event to a button onClick event. So we have to find some roundabout way of doing this. And in my dialogue series, I create something called the Unity event handler. But I'm going to create a new one because, pretty much just because of the fact that some people might have not watched that video. So if you have that script, then you can use that. But if you don't, I'm going to go to my inventory, and I'm going to create a C# script and call this Unity item event handler. We're going to open this up, and we are going to create a public void and call this initiate event. And we're going to create a public Unity event. It's not going to pop up. Alt enter and hit enter again to make it work, or to add the Unity engine events. And then we're going to call this Unity event. And we're going to hide this. Hide an inspector. Because we're not going to be setting the inspector, we're going to be setting it through code. And so when we initiate the event, we check if the event is null. You can do this if you want. This is just in case. Is not equal to null. Realistically, it's never going to be equal to null, so if you do things right. So we go to Unity event dot invoke. So basically we check if it's null. If it's not null, then we invoke the Unity event. And that's it. So we're going to add the item event handler onto our button BG, or just our button, because we already have access to the button through our Unity, or not Unity, but our inventory UI. So let's drag our Unity item event handler here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our use, hit the plus sign, drag in our button BG, then go over to our Unity item event handler and select initiate event. And then we're going to hit apply. Actually, I'm going to hit apply on the button so that it also adds the Unity item event handler. And we're just gonna double check that's on here. Yep. We're gonna check the use. See that's here, and it is. Alright, cool. So whenever we use, we are going to be initiating the event on our Unity item event handler. But we haven't set it up yet, so it's not going to do anything. So we have access to the items event, and we also have access to the Unity event handler. So now we just need to hook it all up. So we're going to do slots, and actually we're just going to copy paste this part because basically what we need. So we're not going to get the next empty slot, we're going to get the same slot of our item, and we're going to say dot get component. So we want the Unity event item handler, and we're going to make the event, we're going to call it Unity event, equal to our consumables, or consumable dot item event. And so now that'll set up the logic behind it. So now we're going to hit play. We're going to add our potion, go to debug test, instead of chest of harmony, I'm going to add my potion, hit Q, have my little hearts pop up. And if you're wondering what happens when I use my heart, if we go over to our events behavior, all I have the heart, so let's go over to my heart. Or in this case, I call it a potion, but it's just a heart. I have it set to test event, and what test event does is it says it's going to debug log test event successful. Hit Z, Z, and then hit use, and then you see test event successful. Hit pressing it, we're gonna get more test event successful. But you might be noticing that our item does not get removed. So whenever we use the item, shouldn't it go down by 1? You're right. So now we need to create another method that basically removes the item. So we're going to need to create another method, and we're going to create this in our inventory slot because all of our buttons have inventory slot, and it's pretty easy to use, and it's also in our inventory UI script, so it becomes pretty handy. And we're going to make a method called as public void use item, and all this is going to do is actually just remove the item, but we're not going to call this remove item because we already have a method called remove item, and you might get confused with that. So let's just call this use item. And all this is going to do is we are going to say inventory manager dot instance dot remove item, and we're going to pass through the item. And then now we need to drag in our button BG, go over to our inventory slot, and then find use item. There's also one more thing. We need to set the confirmation window and set this active to false. And then we need to hit apply, and that should work. So I am going to go over to my test, put in the potion again. I'm going to add some potions. We have some potions of health. Add a bunch of them. And so I'm going to hit use, and you see that the item got used, but now that button didn't get selected again. But we have the logic to select it because we do the same logic with our cancel button. So let's go over to our buttons, not there, main UI, inventory, and you see in our buttons we have a inventory slot called, or we have a thing called cancel button. If we go look at that, all cancel button does is select. So maybe we should call it something different other than cancel button because we're going to be using it in our use button. So let's just call this select same button. And hopefully it doesn't get rid of the reference. Yeah, it does. So we're going to set it again and go to inventory slot and select same button. And we're going over to use. I'm going to add button, go to inventory slot, and hit select same button. So our use and cancel are both going to select the same button when we select them. We hit apply. You can apply on the confirmation window or the button itself. And it's going to double check that it worked with all of our buttons here. So, yep, that looks fine. So now, let's open it up. Let's add, no, we need to add potions, not chess pieces. Potions. Alright, so we're adding potions. Let me just select real quick. Alright, so now it should work. So we're gonna go to our debug test, put the potion in. Probably should have that default by now, but we're gonna add our potion of health. We're going to hit Z, use, and it's going to select the button again. And then let's hit cancel, nothing happens, hit use, and they're all gone. So right now you can hit Z and it's going to pop up even if you don't have an item. And let's not have that happen. So what we're going to do is we are going to find the button, and you see here in our, oh, looks like the wrong button. So you see here in our button, we have the confirmation window. We set the game object to active. We're going to get rid of that. We have to select it. It's kind of tricky. You gotta select it, then hit the minus button, and now it's gone. We're gonna hit apply. And in our select confirm button, we are simply going to say, well, first we need a reference to the confirmation window. So I'm gonna make another reference to that. Public game object. I'm gonna call this confirmation window. And let's set the reference to that first so that we don't forget to. So let's go over to our inventory slot and we have confirmation window. Let's drag in the confirmation window and hit apply. Okay, so now we can do our logic and we can say if item is null, then we just return. And so if our item is not null, we can say confirmation window dot set active to true, and then we select the button. So let's play. And hit Z, nothing happens. We don't get a confirmation window. But if we have a consumable there, we can use it. And if it's not there, we can't use it. Alright, so if you're curious about how you can use reference in-game items or in-game objects through your item event. So let's say I want to make my character invisible or something like that. I can't just drag in my player script or my player object into the event. It's not gonna like that. If you're wondering how you can reference in-game objects through your item event, you can go and watch my video, Unity options or Unity dialog system with options bonus referencing scene objects. Even though we used a dialogue system in this video, it covers the exact same topic. So if you watch this video, you'll understand how to reference scene objects through the item event. I'd like to thank my Patreons Alejandro, Kovian, Bay, Emerson, Kirijo, Polybius, and Yoan. If you want to become a Patreon, you can support me at patreon.com/devbird, where you can join my Discord, or you can just join the Discord in the link description below. And you can suggest videos or ask me questions, and I'll see you guys next time.